Well, here we are, folks. Good evening and welcome to another live stream. Great to have everybody on board. I have Adam Stokes ready and willing to come and join us in just a second. As I always do, let me just remind you, of course, that we don't provide specific financial or legal advice on the channels. It's just a general conversation. We also moderate the stream, so just be aware of that. This is as at the 11th of July 2023 if you're watching in replay. If you'd like to ask a question, use @WalkTheWorld. That'll make sure that I sit in my queue. I've also enabled Super Chat, which means that if you'd like to get your question top of the list, you can do that, or indeed make a contribution to what we do around here. Always greatly appreciated, and always plenty of stuff going on in the chat. I do encourage you to make your opinions known, etc. But if you want to get a question asked, make sure that you use @WalkTheWorld. That makes sure I see it. And just for everybody who's new perhaps on the channel, Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. I'm broadcasting from the UK at the moment. And interestingly, Adam, of course, is in Australia, near Canberra. And we think the connection's even better than it was when I was in Sydney, which is just plain stupid. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to bring Adam in. Let me just do that to make quite sure that we do that. Right, okay, so if I do that and then that, Adam, you should be in.
Martin, good to see you.
How are you doing?
Wonderful. And isn't it ironic that you're on the other side of the planet and our connection has never been so stable? Something is terribly wrong with the world.
I always felt that Wollongong was a second-class place when it came to internet service, right? And I think I've proved it now, because I can tell you that pretty much all of the connections that I have with people across Australia are better this side of the world. It's really, really weird.
I lived in Korea for a couple of years, and they have some, if not the best internet connection in the world. And when I have my Korean friends come here, they get so frustrated with the speed of our internet. But I try to explain we have less than half their population in 50 times the land mass. And when you go over to Mother England, of course, again, smaller land mass with a bigger population, so perhaps better infrastructure.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? It just makes you wonder. And of course, yeah, the land mass is a problem. And by the way, one of the things that I've been wrestling with is bank closures in regional areas. And it's interesting that the banks in regional areas are saying, well, just go online, do it digitally. And of course, you can't in regional areas because the internet doesn't reach very well, and particularly mobile coverage is pretty bad, and the NBN coverage is pretty bad. So many regional towns are just being left, desolate without banking services. So there are real life consequences of our poor digital infrastructure.
Yeah, well, even touching on that banking topic, in Australia, we're seeing that they're putting caps on, of course, ATM withdrawals, which it's been around for a while, but they're kind of coming lower. The amount of money you can take out of your ATM is lowering. The number of ATMs are lowering. The number of branches are lowering. And what we're seeing is that there's many branches across Australia that don't even have cash anymore. So when we talk about, cash is better, I absolutely love cash, and you and I started our journey together fighting against the cash ban in Australia. But whether we like it or not, digital is here, and we can see banks are pulling away from cash because it's slow, it's cumbersome, it's dirty. It costs a lot of money to operate in it. But fundamentally, I hope that we always maintain cash in our societies, no matter which back end we adopt, whether it's a gold-backed standard, a fiat standard, a crypto or Bitcoin standard. I have a very soft spot for cash, and I am very concerned, as we saw with the bushfires in the past when we lost internet connection, people couldn't buy fuel. Then we talk about the concern about crypto, what happens if the internet goes down. But beyond any of that, if the banks, irrespective of what type of money they choose, are going to take cash away from us, whether that be the access through ATMs or physical cash in any branches, plus the reduction of branches, I think things are moving very quickly, Martin. Things are changing very quickly, and I think a lot of people are going to be surprised.
I agree. And I've been talking for some time about the criticality of cash, and interestingly, there's now a slight reaction. So, for example, in the UK, they're now putting into law the obligation to maintain cash and cash access, interestingly. There's a similar discussion going on in New Zealand, a bit of a discussion now in Australia, but much more diffuse at the moment. But one, we have a perfect right to use cash, and we should do. Two, as you say, if power goes off, digital stuff, whatever it is, doesn't work anymore. And we saw that around the bushfires, and we saw around the floods. Cash is required. And of course, CBA went off air a couple of weeks ago for a period of time, and there was a massive problem because, of course, nobody could actually use the digital processes to pay for things, and needed to try and get cash. And in fact, CBA put out a tweet saying, "See what you can borrow from your friends." Which I thought was absolutely hilarious. So the criticality of cash is there. It's very much a human right. It's very much part of the system. And yet, of course, the banks are actually very strongly closing down branches, trying to get people to move away from cash, etc., and claiming that everyone's digitally enabled. And of course, they fudge the statistics quite remarkably, as I discussed in a recent post on my channel. So what's happening is that the banks are doing this for cash saving purposes in terms of their own costs, and making sure they can pay their dividends to their shareholders, not in the interests of the people, not in the interests of banking, not in the interest of personal freedom, and frankly blocking us into a strategy that is digital. And then you overlay things like central bank digital currency and the potential control of the currency, which of course is much easier digitally speaking. The other interesting thing in the UK is the banks are much more aggressive in terms of turning people's accounts off when they think there's a fraudulent transaction on the account and things like that. So even compared with Australia, I've noticed that in other countries, like in the UK, the banks are actually exerting even stronger control on people's accounts and what you can and what you can't do, and how much you can withdraw and how much you can't. So this is all about a further removal of personal freedom. And just to give you another story, in Australia, it's fascinating how if you want to get cash out of your bank account, you go into, they won't let you have it. There was a story the other day I saw reported on the ABC. Somebody wanted a few $1,000s out of their account, and the bank said no. Whose money is it anyway?
Exactly. And in some instances, they don't even have the cash. As I mentioned, a lot of the banks are openly saying, we don't have cash in our branches. And so when we talk about, moving into the future of money, I say, first of all, we are already digital, whether we like it or not, because we can see that the mainstream has gone digital through their back ends and getting rid of cash. But it is more efficient when we have digital, but we must absolutely have those redundancies in place. Because when we have another flood and a fire, what do? Do we write an IOU? Do we pull gold out of our safe? But then you have the verification problem. What will really happen, as you can see, when societies break down, whether that be temporarily or for a longer term, bartering becomes a really big thing. So one of my series of my channel, I've actually done a survival series. So most people know me as a crypto guy, but I've got a strong military background and a combat role background. And I've done a series about survival, urban survival, and what happens in a survival situation. And most people think about survival being Bear Grylls, you're out in the bush hunting for bears. But it could in fact be a situation where all the power goes out, you're in your home, all the infrastructure when it comes to internet has gone out. What do you actually start doing to survive there? Where are you going to get water from? Where do you get food? Where do you get heat? And a big part of that is in fact bartering. So when I'm, I wouldn't call myself a prepper, just that I'm prepared for what may lay around the corner. I have other things that I could use as cash. In a survival situation, when things go down, it could be, the basics, food and water, but then it could also be other things like medical supplies and even alcohol and cigarettes. They get some power in a bartering economy. So if we want to protect ourselves for anything that comes up in the short term or long term, think about what could be used as money. If the government is going to take away physical cash, and for whatever reason we go completely digital, well, what do we do when the systems go down? What would you use for money? And the way I answer that is, well, what would I accept for money? What could you give me that I need? And it of course depends, and that's what goes back to value. What is valuable to you may not be valuable to me. But in a survival situation, you go first to the basics, and then you find some of the luxuries become very, very powerful. As an example, alcohol and cigarettes, maybe even chocolate. We've seen in history that becomes a very powerful bargaining piece. But it is something as a nation we all have to come together and say, well, what are we going to do? If we're going to move digital, what happens when the connection goes out? And if we're going to give banks the power to basically run our economies through fractional reserve lending, forcing us to have our pays to go into these banks. They've got control over our money. You have bail-in and bail-out laws to protect them. Well, what do we get in return? What's the deal? If we're going to give the banks all of this power, what do we get in return? And I think it's fair to say that at a minimum, we should have access to our money, our cash. If we've made a deposit into there, whether it's from our employer, through our savings, through our investments, we should have a right to access that money at any time. At a minimum, we've kind of accepted it's only during business hours, which can be frustrating. But certainly now that we're going through business hours and we can't access our money, I don't think that's a fair deal. I think it's arguably illegal and unconstitutional. And if we're not going to be supported in saying, hey, we want access to our money in our bank accounts, then I think we have a right to look for alternatives. If you look at that case in Lebanon just recently, someone, and you're seeing it around the world, so we're not alone here in Australia where this is happening. A son, he's about 30-ish, he needed to get money out of the bank for I think it was a kidney transplant for his father, or needed some type of medical treatment. So he went into his bank and he said, it's about $30,000 US. And he had the money, it was in his account. And they said, no, you can't have it. Now, because he was desperate and it became a matter of life or death, he held up the bank to steal his own money, not someone else's money, but his own money. And in the end, the bank gave him his own money, but he had to do it at basically gunpoint. He saved his father's life and then they arrested him. And it's a very good case study to say, well, what would you do if you were desperate? If your loved one was about to die and they needed the money that you had in your bank account and the bank said, no, you're not going to do it. What are the consequences for that? Are you going to allow your father, your son, your mother, your daughter to die because the bank won't give you the money? Or when you're desperate, do you take the law into your own hands? And you can see desperate people will do desperate things. And that's what concerns me in the future for our economy.
I think it's very important. Thinking through some of those things is, I think, very, very, very critical for now. But it's just worth reflecting on a couple of things, of course. The first is that if you put money in the bank, so when you put deposits in the bank, what you're doing is actually giving an unsecured loan to the bank, right? So you don't actually have any automatic right to get your money back. And that is something which...
But most people don't know that, and their credits are debts and debts are credits. It's just such a scam.
Well, exactly, because if you actually thought about it and thought about the risks of that, then one, you would demand a higher return on your deposits than you would currently get at the moment. And you can look at it. Interest rates have gone up dramatically, but the interest rates on deposits at the banks haven't gone anything like as much. And it's an issue in Australia, it's an issue in the UK and other places too. So the point there is that the assumption that money is, quote, safe, unquote, in the bank is actually a bit of a myth. Now, okay, the government sort of says, well, we'll guarantee it up to a certain amount. Although, there's always some funny words around it. And if you actually look into it, what you'll discover is there isn't enough in the guarantees to cover all the deposits, all of those things. So the first point is, deposits are not actually as safe. But, it's legitimate to say, but it's my money. Why can't I get it back? And of course, the banks then say, well, we don't hold that much cash because cash is expensive, blah, 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 right? So we need to have notice. And we worry about people because they, might be under coercion when they actually want to,
perfect excuses.
Yeah. And the other one, of course, is that if it's above 10,000, then they've got to tell the, the powers that be, because of course worries about anti-money laundering, all of those things. So there's been a very strong top-down view of reducing people's freedom, reducing their ability to do things. And okay, we managed to fight against the cash ban, which a few years ago was coming in and would restrict it. So that didn't happen. But nevertheless, freedoms have been curtailed left, right, and centre. Now the other point there is banks clip the ticket every time there's a transaction, right? So if you actually are paying for things in cash, the banks don't get anything, right? So one of the other observations, in my view, is that one of the reasons why the banks are going the way they're going is they want to clip the ticket on everything. One, to capture the information around the transaction, and two, simply because if they clip the ticket, that means their profits are actually secured into the future. So there is an economic rationale and a business rationale that the banks are actually executing, which is actually very much against the rights of individuals and communities. And, as I said earlier on, regional areas in particular are being really badly hit with the removal of banking services. And postscript, they'll say, well, you can use Australia Post, but actually Australia Post only offer about 10 to 15% of the services that a typical bank branch operates. So what that means is that many things you can no longer do. And so there's a really big political question here. And the Senate inquiry into regional branch closures is starting to sort of touch on some of these broader issues. But the question is, how far will they go? How far can they go? But as an individual, it's worth thinking through the consequences and implications of this, because if you end up with in a digital future where everything is controlled and managed digitally and electronically, your own personal freedom is massively curtailed.
Clipping the ticket is a really good example, or a good point that you raised there. So to the viewers out there, it's actually taking a cut of every transaction. I remember when I was doing my one of my business degrees, this is going back a while, we're looking at the model of iTunes, so Apple Music. So we're looking at all of these transactions where songs were being made all around the world by all of these different artists, and every time someone listened to it or bought the song, Apple got a commission. And we thought, wow, what an amazing business model, where all of these songs from all of these artists to all of these consumers all around the world, Apple gets a little cut, and they don't really do anything. They just host a transaction. Well, put that business model on steroids, Martin, where you say, as you explained, the banks get it on all transactions, everywhere. Every transaction for everything, they're getting a commission. They're getting a little cut of it. It doesn't matter which industry, in which shop, by which person, at which time, through which means, they're all getting a little cut. And what is really concerning to me, beyond that being unfair, and I would argue corrupt, is that governments also enable it through shop fronts. So as an example, if I want to go and pay my registration, shop fronts now don't accept cash. So they say you must use a credit card or a debit card. So that is a government saying, look, we've created a money for you, Australian people. And now, Australian people, we've given you a bill where you now have to go and pay it. So you say, all right, well, I'm an Australian in Australia. I've got this Australian money. I'm going to an Australian shop front to pay an Australian bill to the Australian government. And the government says, we don't take that money. And you're like, what do you mean you don't take that money? You say, well, we don't accept cash here. You have to go to that third party, a bank, and give them your money, and then you can pay us. And it's like, well, think about that. Imagine any business model in the world. We'll keep it simple, like a coffee shop. And the government said, anyone who wants to buy coffee, you have to actually go through this central coffee bean producer, because that's the only way that you can get that coffee. Well, money is just a product. Money is just a product like coffee. But of course, it is more versatile than coffee, because you can use it in more markets for more things. But because you have governments now saying you must use this centralized body, and this centralized body is also covered by bail-in and bail-out laws, and this centralized body is now taking away access to these deposits. And I'll put it out now. They call crypto a scam. Are you kidding me? You're trying to tell me Bitcoin's a scam while this mess is going on here. When we look at Bitcoin, as I'm the Bitcoin guy here, and for everyone out there, I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I have a lot of investments in a lot of coins, but as a global reserve currency, I strongly believe Bitcoin is the best solution that we have. No one can control that. No one can tell you that you must use this money. And when we sort of extrapolate out into the big financial picture, it's not about Bitcoin being buy low, sell high. It's the antithesis to the corruption of fiat. Fiat is broken. It is a Ponzi scheme. It is unfair. It is toxic. It is centralized. It is destroying economies. It is the cause of inflation, and we have a solution. And for many years, you've seen the main players saying Bitcoin bad, Bitcoin terrorist, Bitcoin corruption. Well, now, my friend, you can see the tables are turning, where the big financial institutions, as I've been telling you for years, they've been buying this stuff up in the background. They're now putting out an ETF. You've got BlackRock coming into it, and you are seeing news articles coming out by the mainstream saying, oh, actually, Bitcoin's good. Bitcoin saves the environment. Bitcoin will save puppies. And it's like, hang on a second. It's great that you're coming around and promoting something that I and we strongly believe in, but what's going on here? And what's going on, in my opinion, is that they're buying this thing up. They have been buying up for a long time. They've been suppressing the price by telling you it's bad. And soon, in my opinion, and I'm putting it on camera, you're going to see this thing comfortably go to six figures again. And the people that are going to make the most money are those who have been in for the long time, but of course, also the banks that have been scooping up this stuff in the back. and are concurrently pressuring the US government, when we're talking about BlackRock, in releasing the first spot-backed ETF. So fiat is dead. We're transitioning to a new money, and unfortunately, those at the very top are going to make a lot of money out of it as well. But that doesn't mean that us at the bottom still don't have opportunities.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, which
That was a
which
long
we will
rant.
unpack. No, it's great. It's great. It's good stuff to talk about. I will just make this point though. Lee Tran made the point. Remind Adam we don't have a Bill of Rights in Australia, so they can do anything, and that's a very important point, right? In fact, the legal framework in Australia is much more fuzzy. And that again gives some governments and other institutions maximum flexibility to do the things they want to do, and our own human rights are somewhat limited, and that's very important in the context of what we started to say. Now let's unpack some of the things that you've been talking about, because the ETF conversation is quite an interesting one, right? There have been a number of attempts in the US for the big financial institutions to launch effectively an ETF on Bitcoin. And each time, so far, the regulators, the SEC in the US, have said, no, we're not quite there yet. But the most recent round on that, it seemed to me that the SEC sort of nudged towards saying, well, if you do a bit of this and a bit of that, and they are definitely meandering down to that particular place where you could see an ETF. Now, if an ETF is actually made available from some of those big financial institutions, what do you think the implications really are?
Right. So, first of all, back to Lee's comment. Absolutely. Very aware that we don't have a Bill of Rights. And I've actually spoken about it extensively on my channel, where if I was somehow the Prime Minister or the Governor General, well, it's so weird the way our parliament structure or our executive power works. But one thing that America does certainly better than us is they do have a Bill of Rights. And I absolutely agree. It is something that is missing in this country. We need a Bill of Rights because the Constitution can only do so much. And it's a big gap in our political system. Just as there's no perfect person or perfect money, there's also no perfect political system. But that is an absolute gap in Australia. We need a Bill of Rights. Moving on to the ETF. So I'm just going to tell you how it is. You've got a massive company called BlackRock. BlackRock pretty much arguably owns the world. What do we mean by that? They have so much money in so many companies with so much control over so many boards that they can steer companies, thus governments, to do what they want to be done. They have unforeseeable amounts of money. And whilst other companies within the United States have pushed for ETFs, they have all been knocked back. There are ETFs, spot-backed, not futures, but spot-backed ETFs in other countries. They have been successful. And in America, they've been saying no, 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 no. And the reason why they've been saying no is because it all links back to the US dollar. The US dollar is a massive Ponzi scheme where one country can print the global reserve currency, and they can do it without any limit, and they do have a debt ceiling, but when they hit the debt ceiling, they just raise it. And on that, they've just recently raised the debt ceiling and spent $1 trillion US in 1 month. That's 1,000 million dollars in 30 days in debt to spend on their economy that they have to pay back through more debt. So this Ponzi scheme, they just get more and more and more and more debt until it eventually collapses. Part of that financial system is all the financial companies and institutions that are deeply intertwined with that. So it's not just the US dollar, it's in fact all the institutions that are connected to it. Once you actually launch a Bitcoin spot-backed ETF, it actually competes with not only the US dollar, but primarily in the first instance, it competes with all of these financial institutions, these toxic intertwined institutions that are part of this massive Ponzi scheme. They've been fighting it for so long. They've been fighting it, and understandably, it's nothing against America. You can see I've got an American flag hanging behind me. I've served in America, served with the Americans, loved in America, lived in America, and have great respect for the country and the people. But if you're the global reserve currency, that is the country that can print it without limit, it's a drug. You get addicted to it. We need more money, print. We need more money, print. But it's coming at the cost of everyone else. When it comes to the ETF and moving into the next evolution of money, they've been fighting it for so long, and it's come to a point where it's like, you know what, we can't actually fight it anymore. We better start looking at it a little bit. And the big company that comes in, that is BlackRock. After all of these other American financial institutions were rejected, when BlackRock comes in with its power, with its reach, and says, we want to crack at this now, There is a lot of lobbying in government, and this isn't a conspiracy theory. Lobbying is perfectly legal. It's legalized coercing governments. It's legalized paying governments to do what you want done. And we can see with the power of BlackRock, when they're saying, we want this ETF to go through, it is a big test of the world. It's a big magnifying glass on the potential corruption within the United States. Because if it goes through, it's kind of a catch-22, Martin, because the truth is, if the ETF goes through, to answer your question specifically, you will comfortably see Bitcoin go over 100,000 Australian dollars again, comfortably, and likely towards the $200,000 mark, because there is unforeseeable amounts of money, not only coming through that ETF, but because BlackRock has so much reach into the mainstream and controls so many boards of directors, you're going to get the narrative going out into the mainstream, as it's already begun, where the mainstream is now saying, oh, in fact, Bitcoin's good for the environment, Bitcoin can do all of these wonderful things. And as the price goes up and it's in an ETF, you get a bull run. You get the bull run where people start coming in and say, oh, take my money, I want some more Bitcoin. So you get a runaway of this coin very, very quickly. If the SEC knocks it back, yes, the United States is a central hub of finance at the moment, but we need to look at what's happening globally. You can see Asia, Hong Kong in particular, has made very quick moves to create a legal structure around cryptocurrencies and ETFs. You can see the same in the Middle East, and you can see the same to an extent within Australia. So although absolutely America is a global financial power of today, will it be that power in the next 10 years or 20 years or 30 years? If you look at history, there's always things that are changing. There is always a change of the guard. No fiat survives indefinitely. There are global powers that always change. You might say you had the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the Spanish Empire, the Dutch Empire, the British Empire, the US Empire, and are we now moving into the Asian Empire? You might look at BRICS as an example. So we're at a tipping point. We're at a tipping point now when once this ETF, spot-backed ETF, is approved, you're going to see a lot of money flood into it. If it's not approved, you're going to see absolutely another attempt at it, because you don't get one shot at it. You can keep applying for it. And it gets to a point where the SEC, run by the United States, has to say, well, if we don't approve this spot-backed ETF, where is the money going to go? And the answer is the money's going to go offshore. It's already begun. It's already happening, where you can see other markets are adopting this technology. They're not turning their back on it. It'd be like saying, we're turning our back on the internet because we like Australia Post. Do you think the rest of the world is going to say, all right, well, because Australia or even America doesn't want to use the internet of knowledge, we're not going to use it because we like the pen and quill and putting letters on sailing ships to go across the ocean? Of course not. They're just going to adopt the internet and move forward without whoever's turning their back on it. So just as the internet was initially got a lot of friction and not really understood, the same happens now with the internet of money. And beyond the back end of money itself being, or the back end of crypto itself, primarily there's 25,000 coins, but primarily it's Bitcoin. Bitcoin makes up 49.17% of the market at time of recording. The back end to that can't be controlled. You can't print more of it. You can't stop it. You can't block it. You can't seize it. And if the world chooses to adopt it, which it's doing very quickly, and one country says, no, we're out, doesn't matter, we're going to crack on anyway.
Now, there was a very interesting point that you made, and it also came up in the chat, and it was this: BRICS are setting up their own central bank digital currency backed by physical gold. And this whole question about who's going to pull the levers into the future is actually, for me, one of the really critical discussions to understand. Obviously, as you say, the US dollar had been preeminent, petrodollar, etc., but it's now a much more interesting question about where things are going to go, and if BRICS, which is expanding its influence and reach, is able to knock the dollar off its perch, that changes a lot of things. If they actually also then link it back into digitalization, there's so many uncertainties around, and I guess for me one of the interesting questions is, well, there's a question of confidence, right? Because money is about confidence, right? How do you know that this £10 note or this $10 note is going to be worth $10 It's only because you believe that the system is actually there to make it, that if I take it to a shop, I can actually convert it into something, right? So it's a question of confidence. And for me, there's a big confidence question milling around in this whole environment. And what I find fascinating, Adam, is a lot of people are throwing a lot of rocks at Bitcoin and are trying to sort of question how, you know, lack of trust, lack of confidence in Bitcoin without looking at their own system, right? Which
Absolutely.
is
Yeah.
completely messed up and is, well, you know, being devalued dramatically. Look at the inflation, you know, the value of money being deflated by that. That's because of all the money printing. Look at all of the you know, shenanigans going on, you know, as you mentioned, the US debt. So I mean, there are some really big questions here, and I guess it does come back to, who are you going to trust ultimately?
So we'll go into BRICS because it is really important. So BRICS is a new currency. We've got Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But beyond that, there's actually 40 countries that we're looking at already that are signing up to it. So it's not just those five nations, and they're big economies. They're saying, so there's many parts to this, but the two main parts of this, first of all, it's saying, well, why do you get to print fake money to buy my real stuff? So I've got to go plow the fields, get fruit or vegetable or wheat or whatever, or dig into my ground and get oil. And I have to do all of this work and make all of this sacrifice. And then you get to just press print on a machine. You're not even pressing print. It's just digital funny money. And then you give me fake money for my real stuff. And then this fake money that you've just given me keeps going. Sure, I can use it on the global stage, but because you keep printing more and more and more of it, it keeps going down and down and down in value. So I'm working harder and harder and harder to give you, the United States, real stuff for your fake money. And we've been playing this game for the last 50-ish years. And now nations are saying, hang on, I've had enough. That's not fair. Why do I have to do real work for your fake money? And even Americans admit to this. I've got many I think my audience is over 50% American, and pretty much all of them agree. I've never had anyone say, no, we have a right to print this fake money, so you have to give us real stuff. They themselves go, yeah, this is kind of dodgy. This is kind of dodgy that we're printing fake money for real stuff. But the second part to that is the weaponization of money. So what we actually saw with the war in Russia is that it showed the world that you can't use the US dollar, because if you annoy the US dollar, they're going to turn your money off. They're going to block you through the SWIFT network. They're going to block you through petrodollars. They're going to put sanctions on you. They're going to raid your bank accounts. They're going to seize your yachts. And that's called the weaponization of money. Now, money needs to be neutral, which Bitcoin is. It is completely neutral. It is blind, borderless, censorship resistance. But as we go to the United States, if you're a nation, if you're China, if you're Russia, if you're India, if you're any nation, and you're doing all of this work, the first one, as we just described, you work really hard to pull real stuff out of the ground in exchange for fake money. And at first it sort of worked because I could use this fake money to buy other real stuff. But because the fake money, they keep printing it faster and faster and faster, and inflation keeps going up and up and up, you're working harder and harder and harder for less money. But even if you beat that hurdle rate or that interest rate, at any time, if you do something that Big Brother America doesn't like, they just flick a switch. And they say, we're cutting you out of the SWIFT network, we're cutting you out of the petrodollar, we're closing your bank accounts, we're seizing your money, and it's all gone. So these nations, they have no choice. They have to look for an alternative money. Now, the question that we ask is, what is the alternative money? Is it their fiat? Is it my fiat? Is it another country's fiat? And because they all understand the game, because we're not stupid, we can see what's happened over the last 50 years, primarily with the US dollar, but centuries of looking at how money works and how fiat collapses. These big nations have come together, and it doesn't matter if you like them or not. They've come together and said, well, hang on a second. We've got nukes. We've got a lot of money. We've got a big power. We don't like this game. What are we going to do? And what they're actually saying is like, okay, we're going to make a gold-backed currency. We're going to make a currency that is backed by gold. And America, if you want to buy our stuff, or world, you've got to give us your gold. And that's going to change everything, because now when America wants 100,000 tons of steel or 50,000 crates of wheat or whatever it is, and they go to Russia or India or China and they say, we want all this stuff. And they say, cool, we'll sell it to you, but we want gold. Well, America's going to have to say, well, hang on, do we want to take this gold out of our vaults? And if they do, then how are they going to replenish the gold? Because it's not like money, as in fiat, where you can just print it. You actually have to go out and destroy the environment and dig up all this earth and try and get little bits of gold and then smolter it and then move it over. So this is going to change everything. The reason why I don't think a gold-backed currency will work is for this reason. It is not trustless. So in theory, a gold-backed currency is a fantastic idea. Why? It's a scarce resource. It's hard. You can't reprint it. It does have an inflation rate of around 2 to 5% per year. That is, every year they kind of pull 2% more out of the ground. Now we don't know what the supply of gold is. People can speculate, but no one on the earth, present or past, knows how much gold there is in the earth. What we do know is that it has an inflation rate of around 2 to 5%, and there's about 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools of gold that we've pulled out of the ground. That much we do know. The reason why I don't believe a gold-backed global reserve currency can work is because it can't be trustless. Well, first of all, the fungibility. Let's go with the fungibility, then we'll talk about the trust. If I want to buy something off you, so I'm in Australia, you're in England, and you want to sell me that microphone in front of you, how do I buy that off you? What do I put the gold in an envelope and send it to you overseas? Of course, that's stupid. But even if you were right in front of me, and we do an exchange of gold, you have to verify the transaction. The only way you can verify the transaction is you pull out your little alchemy test, you test the gold, you weigh it, and that's very slow and cumbersome. With Bitcoin, the transaction is the verification, but we won't go down that path yet. So the only way to use gold as a currency in modern times, or even in past times, as we can see, is you centralize the gold in a vault, and then you write a note against the gold. Now, whether that note is physical, as in a piece of paper, as we used to in the past, or digital, as BRICS is proposing at the moment, it doesn't matter. You centralize the gold, and then you have to write a note against it. But the question we all have to ask and do the thought experiments is, well, where do I put the gold? Do you hold the gold? Do I hold the gold? Does Russia hold the gold, or does China hold the gold? Or do they all hold a bit of the gold? But in any case, then how do you verify the gold? Because the second you centralize gold, we're back to where we started. You have someone who's going to write 2 notes, 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes against the same piece of gold. So how do you verify how much gold is in the safes? Do I get to verify? Do you get to verify? Does Russia get to verify? How do you verify? And even if you say, right, anyone can come into our vaults and verify how much gold we've got in our safes, well, what do? Do I then pay a $3,000 ticket to fly to China, open up this big gold vault, look at 15,000 tons of gold, and then start counting 1, 2, 3. And then even if I am counting blocks of gold, how do I know it's real gold? How do I know there's not tungsten in the middle of it? How do I verify that gold? So the theory of a gold-backed currency is absolutely wonderful. It's a scarce, hard money that we can ensure that it has a value because of its scarcity and its purity, but its fungibility is the issue. And the second we centralize it, we're back to square one. And even as BRICS is doing, what BRICS is doing is they're going to say, right, we'll get all this gold, we'll write a digital note against it, a cryptocurrency. But then I say, well, now you've got 2 things. Bitcoin, you only need the cryptocurrency. But with BRICS, you need the gold and the cryptocurrency. Well, then you've got a demurrage cost. I have to store the gold. I have to have men with guns protecting the gold. I have to have electricity in a building around the gold. I have to have security guards around the gold. That all costs money, and it all has an impact on the environment. And then if I write a cryptocurrency on top of it, well, then I'm doubling the energy of what Bitcoin does, because now I have gold in a vault with men with guns protecting it, and I've ripped up the earth for getting it out of the earth. And I've written a cryptocurrency on top of it. So now I'm doing more damage for the environment. And even if I write a cryptocurrency and I do it really efficiently on top of gold, I still don't know if someone has written 2 coins against the 1 piece of gold. Now we go over to Bitcoin. In Bitcoin, we know what the supply is. You don't need men with guns standing around a safe looking after it. Everyone can see it. It's an open source, immutable blockchain that everyone can verify at any time without getting on a plane and flying to the other side of the world. It operates 24/7. No one can double spend it. Everyone can access it. And once we have the BRICS nations, you're not going to have maybe Brazil or Russia or China or India corrupting themselves, because they're all competing with each other as well, even though today they present as one. But what about tomorrow? What if they start confiscating the gold like the United States did? We've already seen it. We've already seen it in the past. The history shows that when the gold reserve standard sort of slipped over to the United States standard, you go back in history, you can see, I think it was France that originally said, give us back our gold. We're losing trust in the United States dollar. And in the end, America goes, no, we're going to hold that gold. So we see this happening again. And it's not against any nation. It all comes down to trust. So you said confidence. In crypto, the words we use is trust. Confidence is really about the price in our language. Confidence is, why is Bitcoin currently $30,387 US? Because that's how much confidence is in there. But when we talk about trust, the real power of Bitcoin versus gold is that it's trustless. And the irony of the word trustless is that it means complete trust. I don't need to trust you. You don't need to trust me. We don't need to trust them, and they don't need to trust us. It is a trustless system. And in history, we have never, ever had that. We've never had a completely trustless system. Even if we go to gold blocks, it's not trustless because we have to verify the weight and the purity. If we go to the US dollar, it's not trustless because they can print more of it. We don't know how much of it is. They can confiscate it and it can be counterfeited. Any money that we've looked at the past, it has never been completely trustless, where Bitcoin is. And it takes a while to make that distinction. But that is why I believe that in the future, there's going to be a big standoff. We don't trust the US dollar. A gold-backed currency doesn't work for all the reasons I've described. What are our options? Bitcoin. And whilst everyone may knock it, as you just pointed out before, make sure you understand what money is before you start knocking Bitcoin. Make sure you understand the Ponzi scheme of fiat before you start knocking Bitcoin. Make sure you understand the limitations of fungibility and trust when it comes to gold. And then start exploring what is the alternative. And I've been saying it for years and I'll say it again. If you can find me a better solution to a global reserve currency that is trustless, open, immutable, neutral, censorship resistant, and borderless, if you can find a better version of that than Bitcoin, I'm all in. But I've been asking this question for years and no one has even attempted to answer it. They've just said, I don't know, I don't like that. That's fine, but why do you like fiat? Why do you like this Ponzi scheme of fiat when we are all getting wrecked? The interest rates going up and because of inflation. Inflation isn't caused by a war in Russia. They'll tell you that. The inflation is caused from the money printer. And when we call out the government and we say, hey, government, what's going on with the money? They go over to the RBA and they say, oh, it wasn't us. It was the RBA. And the RBA, they don't even really have to answer to anyone. They say, well, it wasn't us. It was the government. And because we're all financially illiterate, because we are not taught about money in school, and the reason why we're not taught about money in school is because if people knew this, there would be riots on the street the next day. Everyone just plays in this Ponzi scheme and goes, oh yeah, interest rates are going up because of Russia or Trump or something. But the reason why interest rates went up is because the government put it up. And the reason why the government put it up is because they printed too much money. And the reason why they printed too much money is because they could, because it is a drug. You can only get so much money out of the people with the visible tax of tax itself. But once you've pushed that to the limit, you smash your populations with the invisible tax of inflation. Inflation is the brutal and invisible tax that is destroying all of us, because governments, and it's not left or right, it is completely bipartisan. Both governments are addicted to this, as in the left or the right or the center. If you have the ability to print unlimited money without consequence, you will. And I can prove it because they are. So what is the solution? The solution is a hard, scarce, immutable, neutral, open source, borderless money that is controlled by no one, but accessible to everyone.
Well, I certainly agree with you with regards to the cause of inflation. I've made a few shows recently about the amount of money printing that went on and the massive amount of liquidity that flooded the markets, of course. And of course, the government ponied up too, particularly through COVID. So they threw yet more money into the system, right? And it actually appears to be costless almost to the government, except not to ordinary people. But that created inflation. So I agree with you on that. And I always think it's really important to come back to, it's not like the financial system we've currently got is fit for purpose and works really well and everything's good and it's all open and transparent and everybody's got a fair and reasonable share. I mean, that's not where we are, right? So it's bust, and it's bust because of the market forces that are in there, the greed, and the fact that governments can do it and basically then say, well, it's nothing to do with us, it's the central banks. And that sort of false dichotomy between central banks and objective independent. If you look carefully, right, the central bank sits down with Treasury very often in Australia and in other places too around the world. So it's fascinating to see the narrative versus reality. So in the UK, for example, where the Bank of England printed huge amounts of money, there was a House of Lords report done a couple of years ago that said this was more about dealing with the political and economic issues in the country than it was actually dealing with anything else, right? So even politicians are saying the banking system is not fit for purpose, right? And it's fascinating to me that central banks keep saying, oh, well, we need to put interest rates up higher to be able to actually crush inflation, and it's down to the the energy shock and the war in Ukraine, etc. But nobody wants to come back to that supply issue, which is they created way more. So I mean, that for me is a definitive stake in the ground, which means that you've got to question whether in fact there's any sense in which this could actually continue. If it does continue, they're just going to print more. And frankly, what's going to happen is the economy is probably going into a recession. Then the government will throw more money at it. They'll print more stuff. They'll probably do a TFF Mark II and give more money to the banks, and we'll go around the traps again. So there are no checks and balances. There's no alternative narrative to actually take us to an alternative future other than more the same. So we need a different approach. And I've always believed, Adam, that you've got to understand what the key objectives of all of this is, right? The key objectives of the way the system has worked for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years is to maximize the wealth in big corporations, maximize the wealth in a small proportion of the people who hold a lot of the wealth, and everybody else are basically on the old the wheel. They're running faster and faster and faster to be able to pay the bills, to be able to actually work, to be able to pay the bills, to work to pay the bills. That's the world we've actually created. So we've actually got a degree of servitude that many people would, if they stopped and thought about it, would be find surprising, right? In other words, you have to work to pay the bills, to work to pay the bills. That's where we are. So anything that offers an alternative narrative into the future is definitely worth, in my mind, considering. But I think there's a different political lens you have to apply to it, and I've always argued that there is a political thing going on here as well as an economic thing. Other question for you though, and it came up in a bit. A number of people say, well, XRP can do all of this, so why is it not XRP? Why Bitcoin? So can we just tease out XRP, what it is, and Bitcoin, what it is, and what are the differences, and what are the similarities between them? Because there are many flavors of crypto as well as Bitcoin, aren't there?
Yeah, so there's currently over 25,000 cryptocurrencies. I have a lot of XRP. I have a lot of Bitcoin as well. There's not one money, and for the record, I don't think there should be one money. We even discussed at the beginning of this, we have a digital money that is very efficient, that works when the internet is working, and then we have a physical money or a bartering system when it's not working, or we choose to use that. Just as there's not one car, it's like saying, what's better, a car or a truck? And it's like, well, it depends what you want to do. It's not better or worse. It depends what the task at hand is. When it comes to XRP versus Bitcoin, I absolutely think there's a place for XRP in the global financial system, because in a perfect world, because we'll go back to a step, the theory of a gold-backed currency is a really good theory, but in practice, for reasons I outlined, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because you've got to centralize it, write a note against it, there's going to be a double spend and so forth. When it comes to Bitcoin, I talk about Bitcoin about being the global reserve currency. It is finite in the sense that there's 21 million, you can't print more, I can't print more. Satoshi Nakamoto, the writer of the Bitcoin paper, he does have one, or they have 1 million Bitcoins that have never moved since the time that Bitcoin was created. Now, you might say, well, hang on, they've got a huge stake in it. Yes, when there was only 2 million Bitcoins mined, they had 50% of the Bitcoins out there. But you've now got 19.5 million, a bit more than 19.5 million of the 21 million Bitcoins mined. So they've got around 5%, a bit less than 5% of the total supply locked up, not doing anything. When we go to XRP, XRP has a different function. XRP is, I would argue that XRP is in fact the new global SWIFT network of the world. So if I want to send money from me to you, there's no reason why I couldn't do it through, at the moment, a stable coin or Bitcoin. But in the traditional financial sector, I actually have to go off it. I have to buy the US dollar. I have to give it to a bank. Well, actually, I go to the bank gets a US dollar. They go through what's technically a messaging system, which is called the SWIFT network. It takes 3 to 5 business days. All these different companies along the way take a cut. It's a very slow process. They can block your money, seize your money, take as much time as they want. And then 2 weeks later, after everyone's pillaged that money and create an exchange rate that they like, you don't get to choose exchange rate, you eventually get your payment over in England. That's the SWIFT network. That's what we have at the moment, centralized through a central network, and you must use the US dollar because that's how it goes through the SWIFT network. Same with the petrodollar. When we look at XRP is a very good, well, Ripple is the company and XRP is the token. It is a very good technology, and it's why I have invested in this technology and have a big bag of it. It's different to a global reserve currency. XRP, in my opinion, shouldn't and can't be the global reserve currency because it is less decentralized than Bitcoin. That is, you have a board of directors of Ripple. It is a new and improved version of a financial messaging system of the SWIFT network. It's got massive liquidity pools. It's got good technology. But unlike Bitcoin, it does have a board of directors. It does have people centralized running it. Now, the XRP army, and this is where we have a bit of a banter, they say, no, it's completely decentralized. No, it's not. Proof of stake versus proof of work is for another argument. But everyone's come out. 25,000 coins have come out, right? So there's all these different coins that have come out and said, we're a bit of Bitcoin. No, we're a bit of Bitcoin. And I'm saying, after 13 years of testing it, the market dominance is, as I said, 49, looking at the numbers right now, it's 49.21% of all the money in crypto is with Bitcoin. XRP has a much smaller portion of the market, but XRP has a different function than Bitcoin. XRP is a facilitator of payments where we can move money from point A to point B with very low friction and very low speed, and we can move this money around. And I think that's fantastic. But Bitcoin is the digital gold. It's the global reserve currency that is completely decentralized and has a different purpose. Which is better, gold or silver? Well, they're kind of different. Which is better, a car or a truck? It depends what you want to do. And what should be the global reserve currency? In my opinion, definitely shouldn't be XRP. Definitely shouldn't be the US dollar. It should be Bitcoin because it's completely trustless, completely neutral, and completely censorship resistant. We can see, in fact, with XRP, there have been cases where XRP transactions have been stopped. And that is an issue because then you have a centralized body stopping like, we better not make that transaction. And the way I can substantiate this is because who is the SEC taking on at the moment? The SEC is taking on about 40 different cryptocurrencies, but at the top of their list is Ripple. And that is an example of it is, in fact, a human body that can be taken on by another human body. So when you have humans that can take on humans, that is not a completely neutral, censorship-resistant money. The reason why Ripple or the SEC cannot sue Bitcoin is because there is no Bitcoin company. There is no Bitcoin board of directors. There is no one to sue with Bitcoin. It is merely an algorithm. It is a computer code running across thousands of nodes powered by millions of individual miners around the world. Ripple is completely different. Ripple can be sued. It is being sued. It is being taken on by the United States, and it can be corrupted for better or worse by government bodies who are trying to shut it down. The SEC has said themselves, we don't consider Bitcoin a security, but the SEC has equally said, we do consider Ripple a security and we're going to sue them and stop them. And that is the primary difference. You cannot stop Bitcoin. You can stop Ripple.
I love it. I tell you what, you've got the chat going like you wouldn't believe.
I know the XRP army. I know they're being off. I can't read it, but I've been in this space for 7 years. Yes. The XRP, and we call them the XRP army respectfully. We call them the XRP army because they are so passionate about their project, and I love it. And to be clear to the XRP army, again, I have a lot of XRP. I've made a huge investment in it, but it is very different to how Bitcoin will play out. Just my opinion. Who knows?
I love it. Now, Jason asked a very interesting question a little while ago, and it's might be slightly hard to read. So let me just read it to you, if I can just flick it. So, when ISO 20022 is enforced, wouldn't this make transacting in Bitcoin illegal? If so, how could it be worth so much if it cannot trade it due to local laws preventing it? If it is not ISO compliant, it is easy for authorities to track Bitcoin these days. Thoughts?
Okay, so we'll start with the end of the question. Bitcoin doesn't pretend to be untraceable. It is very traceable. And if you're going to do crime, you don't use Bitcoin because for that exact reason that Jason's outlined, it's very traceable. The ISO 20022 standards is an international standard that we apply to many things. It's an international standard for, we use this screw with this aircraft, we use this chemical with this type of thing. And the ISO 2022 standard for money, they've written into there, we're going to use XRP. And that in itself shows the corruption of, arguably, of XRP. Because, and don't misquote me on that, I'm not saying XRP is corrupt. What I am saying is that it's corruptible in the sense that there's someone at the top, someone in a board of directors that says, you've got to use this money. And if you don't use this money, we'll put you in jail. Now, how is that different to the US dollar? You've got to use this money. And if you don't use this money, we're going to bomb you and say you've got weapons of mass destruction. We're going to say crimes against humanity. You will use the money or we'll shut down your accounts. Well, how do you enforce that with China? Like, how is the ISO 2022 going to be enforced with China and Russia? If BRICS comes up and BRICS says, we're going to use BRICS, and then America or whoever's at the head of the board of the ISO standard says, no, this paper here says you have to use XRP. Do you really, really think that Russia, China, India, and all the other nations that have signed up to BRICS, they're going to go, oh yeah, fair enough, sorry, we'll can this entire BRICS project because that document written by those people over there says that we have to use this money? No. They're going to say, we choose to use this money. Now, the real question is, how do you enforce that document? Like, literally, you could go through the thought experiments and say, how do we enforce the ISO standards? How do we enforce the US dollar? How do we enforce any standard? And the answer, when you go all the way down the chain, is violence. The only way you can enforce something ultimately is violence. And you say, oh, don't be silly, Adam, we can fine them. Okay, well, what if you find them and you don't pay the fine? Well, ultimately, men with guns come to your house, they arrest you, and they physically put you into a cage. Well, how do you do that on the global stage? If the global stage says, we don't want to use XRP, we're going to use this. Well, what are you going to do? How are you going to stop it? So it really comes down to, how is that document enforceable? And if it is enforceable, do we want to adopt a money of violence, which is forced through violence, or do we want to use a money of peace? So I don't know what will happen with XRP, and no one actually knows what's going to happen with XRP. The issue I have with if there is the XRP army, is that they say, no, this is the best coin in the world. It's got the best technology in the world. And this ISO document says we're going to use it, so we're going to use it. And I said, well, okay, why haven't you used it? Because XRP does work. It absolutely works. I'm the first to say XRP army, it works. So why aren't they using it? Why aren't the banks using it? Why isn't it in play now? Why is it being sued by the SEC? Why has Bitcoin got 50% dominance? Why is XRP's high of $3 now down to 47 cents? If this technology is so great and it has so much backing behind it, why is it not being used by the banks and the financial systems? And why is it being sued by the SEC? And I don't have the answer to that, but I think they are very legitimate questions. Then we go a step further and say, well, if we've got all of these other coins and all of these banks have all of this money, I've done a documentary on XRP, and I present more questions than answers. If you're the banking sector and you have all the money in the world and you can print money through fractional reserve lending and say it wasn't us, it was them, and you can get bail-ins and bail-out laws, why would I use your technology when I could use my technology? And the answer I get from the army is, our technology is superior. Well, okay, it's a computer code. All of it is a code. You can fork codes, you can copy it, you can paste it. Why are they going to use yours and not theirs. Now, that's not to say they won't use it. Like, when governments buy trucks, they don't go and buy their own, they don't make their own trucks. They go and use someone else's technology. So I completely agree with that. But as we move through the crypto timeline, XRP has been out for ages and it hasn't been adopted by financial institutions. It has gone down in price and it is being sued by the SEC. It is completely different to Bitcoin. I don't know if it will succeed. So as an investor, I don't let my ego get in the way. As an investor, I say, well, it could work. So here's $50,000 XRP. Let's see what happens. If it goes, I want XRP to succeed. Why? Because if it does, I'm going to make millions. But if it doesn't succeed, I understand. As an investor and a trader, I've spread my risk. And I wouldn't suggest on any coin you go all in. But if you were going to go all in on any one coin, I personally wouldn't go into with XRP, but I know and I understand why a lot of people do. That's just not me.
Very good. Thank you for that. And
is the chat going off?
Yeah. Now there's a massive. It's very hard to follow it all, but that's okay. Now there's another interesting question that's been bubbling around in the chat, and I wouldn't be quite interested in this. The SH2 algorithm. So Cookie Monster says it was NASA made, and then Cookie Monster.
NSA.
Yeah, NSA. Sorry, and then ask him about the SH2 algorithm. Now, I don't know what an SH2A algorithm is, so what is it? Is it important?
I know, and hi Cookie Monster, good to see you. So Cookie Monster comes over to my channel from your channel and gives me endless crap about XRP, but I really like this guy because, Cookie Monster, a shout out to you. I often refer to this guy or girl, I don't know who you are, Cookie Monster, or a monster, because they come forth into my channel and they really always debate me respectfully about XRP, and I enjoy that. So thank you, Cookie Monster. To answer the question simply, I don't know what the SHA-2 is. I know what the SHA-256 algorithm is. The SHA-256 algorithm is the algorithm that mines on Bitcoin. And some people have said that the CIA or the NSA made Bitcoin as a scam to crash economies and bring money. There's lots of reasons why they say they did it. And I say, well, that's a great theory, but show me the proof. Oh, no, it happened. Well, what do you mean it happened? So the United States government's secret agencies went out and invented Bitcoin secretly and released it into the market to go and capture your money and then do something with it. Look, these are all theories, and I can't deny that theory, but I go the other way and say, well, show me the proof. How do you know that these secret government agencies made Bitcoin that now nations and companies and banks are buying as a scam, whilst they've been concurrently releasing media releases of Bitcoin bad, Bitcoin criminal, Bitcoin terrorism? It's, in my opinion, it's a pretty far out theory, but it's a theory that I can't substantiate or deny. But equally, I think those who make the allegation, they can't substantiate it or deny it.
Very good. Yeah. As with all of these things, of course, you can sort of swim around in the morass for quite some time and maybe not get very far. But there's another interesting morass that I want to touch on, and that is the question of the exchanges, right? Because in the last few months, we've seen Binance and a few other exchanges in the US essentially receive very heavy flack from the SEC and accusing some exchanges of mixing up client money with their own money and then effectively not doing what they said they were going to do. And we've seen some failures as well. What's your reading of the exchanges, and how do you find a good one rather than not a good one? And what is it the SEC is trying to get at?
So in simple terms, an exchange, of course, is where I swap something for something. It's typically an on-ramp. When we talk about crypto exchanges, we look at them as an on-ramp where we take our dirty, broken, corrupt fiat and we exchange it for clean, crisp crypto, whether that crypto is Bitcoin or XRP or Ethereum or whatever. Different exchanges offer different products. That is, there isn't one exchange in the world that offers all 25,000 cryptocurrencies. And there's about 26,000 cryptocurrencies because it keeps going up very quickly. So there are different exchanges for different functions, and they can offer yielding products, staking rewards. You can do many things on exchanges, but in the simplest term, an exchange is to swap one thing for another. And for most of us, it's swapping fiat for crypto and then swapping it back from crypto to fiat. The biggest exchange in the world at time of recording is Binance. Binance is by far the biggest in the world. It's got a lot of products, it operates in a lot of jurisdictions, and it made a lot of money, a crap load of money. There's many ways to make money on an exchange, but essentially, when you do an exchange, there's a fee, and that fee goes to the parent exchange. And when you're doing billions of dollars of trade a day, and you're taking a small percentage of billions of dollars of trade every single day, you're making a lot of money, unforeseeable amounts of money. And Binance has got a big chunk of the global exchange rates, or sorry, exchange fees through doing all of this exchange globally. Now, in Australia, I've used Binance for many years. I also invested in the Binance token. The issue with Binance is it became so big and powerful that it came under attack twice. And I actually predicted this. It's on camera. I predicted it many years ago. I said, the issue with Binance is that it's so good that it's going to come under attack by government. And that prediction absolutely came to fruition. It came to fruition because the United States is like, well, hang on a second. First of all, you're taking a lot of our money as an on-ramp, so US dollars, onto these global exchanges. So you had leakage out of the United States economy where people were using Binance US, and the United States dollar was going out into the economy because they're buying all of this cryptocurrency. But it was also a competitor, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, with these embedded traditional financial systems. So if you look at the New York Stock Exchange, that's an exchange for traditional shares. Just as I described with all of these exchanges happening, the parent company and all the financial institutions intertwined with it, they're taking all of these little cuts of all of these trades. Well, now when you do it on someone else's exchange, you're basically competing with the New York Stock Exchange and all of the exchanges in the United States. So straight away, it's like, well, hang on a second. We're losing money from our economy because we're not investing in our stuff. You're investing in those markets, and you're not using our exchanges. You're using those exchanges. So it's reasonable that America originally said, well, we're going to stop Binance US, but then they extrapolated to say, no, we're just going to stop all of Binance because it's a massive competitor. Now, there are allegations by the government that, Binance has done something wrong, but Binance has done, well, everyone's got to have their day in court. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge. I haven't seen what the proof is. I haven't seen what the evidence is. All I know is that Binance is massive. They're hugely successful, and they're taking a lot of money out of the United States economy and competing with these United States established financial systems. In Australia, the biggest exchange in Australia is CoinSpot. It's certainly a product that I endorse. I've got no shares in that company per se. I don't even think it's a publicly listed company, but it's been around for 11 years. It's Australia's biggest crypto exchange. They're in Melbourne. You can talk to them. It's safe to use them. So when it goes to what is a good exchange, there's two parts to this. Where people go wrong is that they use exchanges as a bank. So they go into the exchange, they buy crypto, and then they leave the crypto on the exchange. And then what happens is the exchange later goes bust, or they're corrupt, or they get hacked, or something goes wrong, and then people lose all of that money. So when you hear about people losing money in crypto, there's kind of three main ways. They do a bad trade. They buy high and sell low. That was a bad trade. Or they don't actually invest in crypto. The second way they lose money is they don't actually invest in crypto. They think they're investing in crypto, but they invest in through some Russian scam site or Nigerian scam site, and they think they're buying crypto, but they're not. They're just giving their money away to some foreign scam site. But the third main way that they lose money in crypto is that they go to a real exchange, they buy crypto, they leave the crypto on the exchange, then the exchange collapses and they don't get access to that crypto. So the way to protect yourself, even if we look at FTX as an example, FTX was a massive crypto exchange. It had a lot of products. It collapsed through, well, they got to have their day in court, but corruption. You can see through the on-chain analytics where the money was going. What they did, they commingled funds where they said, oh, we're going to keep these funds here for that and these funds here for this thing, but they in fact mixed it all together and ended up in a big mess. But even if you used FTX, if you had used FTX as an exchange and you had got in there and you say you got $100 American dollars or Australian dollars or any currency, you go and buy $100 worth of Bitcoin, and then you pulled that Bitcoin off the exchange and put it in a cold wallet, a hardware wallet. I think you've got one sitting around here. But the collapse of the exchange wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered. It'd be like going into a shop and, you go and buy a can of Coke. You walk out of the shop and then the shop blows up or collapses. Sure, it's tragic, but it doesn't matter. You've got your can of Coke. You already bought it. where people go wrong is that they use these exchanges like banks. So they go in there, and as we discussed, banks aren't safe either. They go in there, they buy their crypto, and they leave it on the exchange. So that's a long way to answer the big question of what makes a good exchange. Well, one that's been around for a while and has been audited and is transparent. Why is America going after certain exchanges? Because they're competing with their exchanges. For example, Coinbase is the United States' biggest exchange, and although Coinbase is coming under pressure, my take on it is this: they need to actually be seen to be fair. So at the moment, they're kind of saying, well, we're taking on Binance, which is the world's biggest exchange, and we're taking on Coinbase, which is America's biggest exchange. But I put the prediction out there right now. Binance is going to be banned from the United States and Coinbase will not be. Why? Because Coinbase is American, and America, understandably, I've got no issue with this, they want to keep their money in their country, and they want to make sure that all of those billions of dollars in transaction fees are kept in the United States. And we can see that even with BlackRock, with their ETF. BlackRock has said that they're going to use Coinbase as their exchange, as the body that will actually buy and hold the crypto itself. They can't do it with Binance because Binance is offshore. So when we look at also what's happening around the world with other exchanges, a lot of exchanges are being created. We could talk about decentralized exchanges, which is for another topic. There's a lot to this, but there's a lot of competitions with exchanges at the moment. And for you as a consumer, you have to be very careful, because if you're not actually with a good exchange, you have two main risks. One, it's not actually an exchange. You think you're buying Bitcoin, you think you're buying Ethereum, you think you're buying XRP, but you're not. The second risk is that you are actually buying it, but the exchange collapses. So the best way to do it, in my opinion, is you go with a certified exchange, a long-standing exchange, and don't leave your crypto on the exchange. Get in there, buy your crypto, take it off, put it in your cold storage wallet, and then no one can touch it. And if the exchange collapses or gets sued, it doesn't affect you. It doesn't affect you because you've got your crypto in your cold storage.
Cold storage sounds like a good thing. Now, there was a follow-up question which came in while you were talking. So Commonwealth and in fact Westpac too have put delays and limits on transfers to exchanges and currency controls. What's your perspective there? Is that to protect individuals, or is it actually to give them an on-ramp later into doing digital stuff themselves?
Yeah, great question, and I'm glad it was raised. So to our international viewers, Commonwealth Bank of Australia is the biggest bank in Australia, and they recently released these notices to their users that for the protection of the customer, for the protection of you and I, Martin, they're going to actually slow down these transactions. So there's two sides to it. And when I say slow down the transaction, if I want to take my fiat and put it onto a crypto exchange, there's two main things they did. First of all, they slow it down so it can't happen instantly. And second of all, they put a limit on it. So they say, right, you can only put $1,000 on a day. I'm making up the numbers now. You can put $1,000 on a day, and it's going to take up to 3 business days for it to clear through. As opposed to in the past, you could put whatever you want into these exchanges instantly. So on one hand, it does make sense because, as I described, of the 3 ways people lose money in crypto: 1, they make a bad trade, they buy high and sell low, that's bad. 2, they go to a scam site. And the third one, of course, is that they have their money on exchange and the exchange collapses. But the second one we're going to talk about, we've had massive loss from this country, where we've taken billions of dollars of our money, and we think we're investing it into crypto, but we're investing it into these fake sites. It looks like a real exchange, and the person on the phone with the accent told you it was a real exchange, and you think that you're buying this magic crypto thing that everyone's talking about and Adam's ranting about. So you go to this uncertified, dodgy exchange and you send money to it, and then they disappear and you lose all of your money. You then ring up the bank in tears and say, I've lost all my money, can you help me? And the bank has a big expense they won't get it back. But if it's done on a credit card, you can get sort of refunds on credit cards, but that's for a video in itself. But there's a lot of admin behind it with, trying to track down this money, which they'll never get back. It's gone forever. But it also actually becomes a matter of national security. So I briefed the Australian Federal Police last year about this. It's in fact a matter of national security when you've got thousands upon thousands and thousands of Australians putting in 10, 20, 30, 40. One of my subs told me that they put in $250,000 as a family into a scam site. Yes, it's tragic for the individual, but it's also tragic for the nation because we have massive leakage of the nation of billions of dollars going offshore, avoiding tax, avoiding whatever could be put into our gross domestic product, avoiding efficiencies, impacting people's retirements. So yeah, it was actually a big impact on these individuals and the nation. That's the feel-good story for what the Commonwealth Bank did. The other side to this argument is that they're saying, well, hang on a second, as I've described, these crypto markets, they're competing with our markets. They're creating with CommSec, which is the Commonwealth Bank's on-ramp, if you will, to the Australian Stock Exchange and to other global exchanges, where you use the Commonwealth Bank's CommSec to give them your money to do these trades on traditional financial markets. On those markets, it's like a $500 minimum buy, it's like a $15 fee to get in and get out. It only operates during business hours. It's very slow and cumbersome. Whereas with crypto markets, I can do 1 cent at 3 o'clock in the morning instantly without any friction at all. So 2 parts to it. 1, a lot of people are losing money through scams. But 2, and I would argue the second part is the biggest part of it, because do banks really care about you? Like, do banks really get together and say, oh, how are we going to make their lives better for our customers? How are we going to protect the people? How are we going to make life for Grandma Jenny better by protecting her assets and looking after her? Of course not. And they're all about profits, and they're legally about profits. That is, if they don't make profits, they stand to get in trouble, in the sense that a company's responsibility to its shareholders is to make as many profits as possible. So part of this process, when you've taken all the fees off your customers, when you've got rid of all the ATMs, when you've shut down all the branches, when you've removed cash from the branches that are remaining, you say, right, what's left? We've got competitors. Who are the competitors? Crypto. All right, let's stop the payment to the crypto platforms. And this actually goes back to Lee's comment in the beginning of the video. This is where we actually need a Bill of Rights. So I've made a video in response to Commonwealth Bank. It's like, who the hell are you to tell me what I can do with my money? Because if you really cared about me losing my money, why is it, Martin, that I can go to a casino at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning where they're serving alcohol? I can pull money out of an ATM there, and I can blow all of my money at the casino. I can put $1,000, $2,000, $10,000 a night at the casino every night and blow all my money. Well, the banks aren't stopping that. The banks don't care about that. I can go to the Melbourne Cup, I can go to the Dogs, I can go to the racetrack, I can do whatever I want on these established financial markets within Australia, but I can't do it in crypto. And that's the issue I have. Why is it that I need your permission, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, to spend my money where I like, when I like, how I like? And the big thing about all of this, the big concern about all of this, is that the Commonwealth Bank of Australia has itself admitted that it was going to offer Bitcoin services to its customers. So you have a direct conflict of interest. The Commonwealth Bank of Australia admitted themselves, we're going to start offering these products to our customers. And then a little bit later, they said, but we're going to stop you putting your money into our competitors because we care about you. And it's like, well, hang on a second. That stinks. That stinks, because you're going to sell me the product that you're stopping me from buying from someone else.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's an interesting, and this competitive landscape, right? And I do believe that banks make decisions not for the interest of their customers, but for for other more competitive reasons, I fear. And talking about competitive landscapes and making strategic decisions, last topic for tonight, just back to central bank digital currencies, right? Because we know that there are pilots running in Australia, there are pilots running in other places. There's a very sort of coherent set of arguments now from the World Economic Forum and other players, global players, say, well, we're quite nice to be able to connect digital currencies together and those things. We know that Jerome Powell and other people in the US and the Federal Reserve have said, well, they will give us extra tools to be able to actually do more monetary policy stuff if we use central bank digital currencies, right? So there's a huge agenda of central bank digital currencies. And you and I argued about this before, insofar that this is actually almost an alternative route to the future. And then they, of course, white ant Bitcoin and other currencies and say, well, you can't trust them, but you can trust this. So come off your long run and give us the central bank digital currency story.
Sure. So first of all, we'll build it up. We know that fiat is a scam, but they want to make it a more efficient scam. We know that we're going to a digital currency. So in the first instance, we already use digital, and we can all accept that. And even SEC Chair Gensler has said that. Why do I need another crypto? Why do I need another digital currency when I already have the US dollar? And all governments are following suit. So we understand that digital is the way to go. We then go on to cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are the way to use digital money. Then we take it a step further. Governments have said, well, hang on a second, we could use a CBDC, which takes the best and worst of both worlds. It takes the best of fiat for them, but the worst for us, because they can print of it as much as they want. They take the best of crypto for them because it's more efficient than printing presses and the systems that they have in place, but the worst for us, because if it's centralized, they can actually control it. So a CBDC is fiat tyranny. That's essentially what a CBDC is. You take fiat in its current form and you put it on roids. You say, right, we can print of as much of this as we want, as fast as we want. We can block it, seize it, we can expire it. So that's a big one I don't think we touched on before. I pay you $1,000 for all the week's work, and they say, if you don't spend this money by next week, it's going to vanish. And so how do you save then? How do you save if your money has an expiry date on it? They can also put geopolitical bounds on it, or physical bounds on it. So during a lockdown, as an example, they say, right, everyone's got to stay in your state. So you might live on a border town and you cross from, as an example, Victoria to New South Wales, and you go and buy your bread. The currency won't work, because when you go to do your pay pass, or your blip, and it goes, oh, sorry, this isn't allowed on this border. And you say, well, hang on, it's Australian dollar. And they say, no, it's been locked down. They can track it, they can seize it, they can print more of it. So a CBDC is absolutely on the agenda for governments, because fiats already exist, but they just want to have a more powerful fiat, a fiat that you can do absolutely anything with. And it is my mission, and I hope that it's going to be your mission and John Adams' mission as well, to educate the people on the danger of a CBDC. It is absolute tyranny, and everyone should be terrified of it. Because if you reckon fiat's bad now, you wait till you've got a CBDC. If they want to control inflation, instead of them putting up interest rates, if they've printed too much CBDCs, they will literally just take 30% of everyone's money without your permission. It could be 5%, 20%, 50%, whatever percent they want. So you've got a digital wallet with 1,000 CBDCs in it. The government says, oh, hang on, we've got too much money in the economy. And they just go blip, and they take 10% of everyone's money instantly. How do you hide from that? How do you hide from that? You might say at the moment, well, at least if they're going to take money out of my bank account, I can take through a bail-in or a bail-out law, I can take the cash out of my bank and hide it under my mattress. If you've got a CBDC, you're completely screwed. There's no way you can hide from it at all. You can't hide from inflation. They can tax you as much as they want. You can't hide from bail-ins or bail-outs. You are completely under the power of the state. And then we go on to the surveillance state. The surveillance state, which is not a conspiracy theory, we're already there, where we can see that if you have wrong think, if you vote for the wrong political party, if you make the wrong tweet on Twitter, and the government or the banking sector doesn't like it, they will seize your money. Where they can already do it with your bank accounts, and have already done it, where they block your bank accounts and seize your money out of that. If you say, right, I'm opting out of the banking sector, but you're stuck with the CBDC, there's no way of opting out. You are under complete tyrannical rule, and it is absolutely terrifying. What's the solution? Bitcoin. You can't block, stop, seize, print, inflate or deflate my money in Bitcoin. It's mine. I own it. I control it. You can't do anything. Even if you want to come into my house, kick down the door and hold a gun to my head and say, give me your Bitcoin. If I've got the seed phrase in my head, and I say I'm not giving it to you, and they kill me, as an extreme example. I realize this is an extreme example, but extreme examples give us extreme contrast, and then we can dial it back from then. If you do that in that situation, the Bitcoin is gone. If I've stored the Bitcoin in cold storage and I have the seed phrase in my head, you can't steal that money. You can steal it if it's gold. You can steal it if it's cash. You can steal it if it's a CBDC. And that's the power of Bitcoin, is that it's non-seizable. You can't seize it. And that is why initially government's like, man, we don't like the idea of that. But money was never a function of government. We, in our modern era, we believe that money is a function of government. It's not. That is not a function of government. But for whatever reason, we've allowed it to creep in to say, oh yeah, money is a function of government. That's where the money comes from. No, it doesn't. For some reason, we've accepted this. And in fact, even the government says it. Even the government says, oh, we didn't print the money. It was them. It was the RBA. They printed the money. The Fed printed the money. But of course, we know that's a big scam, because if I printed money, I would go to jail. But if the RBA prints money, or the banks through fractional reserve lending, well, that's okay. So it's a cop-out when the government says, we don't print the money. Of course you print the money. You enable the people to print the money who give it to you for free so you can buy all of your stuff. And that is how money has become a function of government. It shouldn't be. Money is in fact a language, a store of value, a medium of exchange, a unit of account, a proof of work, a proof of time, a proof of energy by us, all of us, including individuals within the government. Where it all falls to pieces is where we have a centralized, corrupt, unaccountable body, whoever they may be, left, right, banks, I don't know who's in charge, BlackRock, the institutions, I don't know who's in charge. What I do know, that is when you have one person, one entity, one group who can print, block, seize, do whatever they want with all the money in the world, we are not in a free society. It's worse than communism, because at least in communism, they say we're communist. But when we have this crony capitalism, this nepotism, this fake democracy, no one knows where they stand. We think we've got free speech. We think we've got control over our money. We think we're living in a democratic society. And then we do something, and then bang, our banks are shut down. We're cancelled and we're locked up. It's very scary times. And the foundation to all of it is money. Whether we like it or not, all of it is money. And so the way to undo the corruption, you can put in all of these laws. You can say, oh, I'm going to do all of this. I'm going to have all of these inquiries. I'm going to have all of these government agencies, all of which cost money. Or you can get right to the core of it and say, how do we protect everyone? And the answer is, we need a neutral money. And the only neutral money we have in the world is Bitcoin.
Great way to end the show, Adams. No, that's good. Thank you very much. And look, I always enjoy chatting with you, because your strong, potent opinions always get a lot of reaction in the chat. It's hilarious to watch. But there are some really, really critical points here about democracy, and about who's in control, and about how much flexibility and freedom we have, and how much that freedom is being eroded. And I often come back to the analogy of the frog in the pan, right? You turn the heat up a little and the frog doesn't notice, and you turn the heat up a little more and the frog doesn't notice, and then suddenly the frog is cooked. And I feel that some of the things that are going on at the moment are actually things which is taking us in a direction where ultimately we could be cooked. And and unfortunately, it seems to me a lot of people haven't really woken up to some of the the real nuances about what's going on at the moment. And I've got a perspective that says some of the mainstream media coverage is almost deliberately designed to obfuscate some of these critical issues that are going on at the moment. So these sorts of conversations, I think, are pretty important, because part of being able to chart your own future and future society is to understand how things are actually playing out, and the difference between what the mythology is and what's actually going on. And certainly I think today we've explored a few areas where things are not the way we want them.
There's one thing that you said to me. I can't remember if it was me interviewing you or you interviewing me or us talking off camera, but I've never forgotten it. You said you were sick and tired of the lies. You were so frustrated with the lies of the politicians and the media. And I really empathize with what you were saying there. So again, where you and I come together is that we may have different outlooks of what the future of money is, but where we all agree, and I think to all the viewers out there, for all the emotion I may stir up out there, I think where we can all come together is that we all agree that money is broken, and we all agree that something's not right. And I think we also all agree that we're sick of the lies. We're sick of the deception from whoever's in charge on both sides. This is completely bipartisan, and we're sick of the misleading information from the media, and we're sick of the lack of accountability. They seem to be able to, whoever's in charge, and I don't know who's in charge, but whoever's in charge, they seem to be able to do whatever the hell they want and get away with it. And I think it's coming to a time where it's like, can we all just have the one set of rules? Whether it's these rules or those rules, as long as we all know what the rules are, and as long as they're all fair, that you can't print money, I can't print money, I can't lie to governments, and governments can't lie to us. If we all just have one set of rules, at least we can all move forward together. But so as long as we have rules for thee and rules for me, we will never succeed as a society.
Absolutely. And it goes back actually to a very fundamental question, which is, well, what's society for in the first place? And I often come back to this point, right? Because the point is that at the moment, society is designed whereby, as I said earlier on, everybody's pedaling really, really hard, and wealth is created and it bubbles up, and actually wealth actually is lodged in a relatively small proportion of companies in the population, and it's about maximising the wealth within corporations and those sorts of things. We've lost the plot, in my view, because actually I want to turn it on its head and say, no. Society is about people, businesses, what's going on locally, and the rest of that superstructure should be an infrastructure that supports it rather than actually the end product of the processes. And that's a very fundamental philosophical point, right, which we probably won't be able to take further tonight. But for me, there's a really, really big set of questions here about the future of society, and whether in fact the way that society works is actually in the interest of the people at the moment. And for me, that's frankly the big question.
Yeah, the frog in the pot of hot water is a really good analogy. We don't even know it's going to happen until it's too late. Some do. And some of us ringing the bell and saying, "Hey, everyone, look around." It's like, no, it's all right, it's all right. And then bang, we're gonna be cooked. And even if we then do wake up, we're gonna be so exhausted and defeated and melted in that pot of this metaphoric pot of lies and traps and incarceration that there's going to be no way out.
Absolutely. So at least we try to share some of these broader opinions on this channel here. Adam, thanks very much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. And just before I close out, I should make the point that next week Leif Van Onsselen's coming on. We're going to talk about the housing Ponzi, and how that's been working. I might actually just do two things before I finally close the show. And let me do that one first. We do have a doggy cam actually in place. Luna is tied up in her bed at the moment. She looks like a sack of potatoes, but she's actually there. Meteor has slid around the corner. So that's the best I can do on that one. I think if I go there, yeah, there you go. That's the studio. So this is the studio as currently constructed, and you can see Adam there coming in over on the input channel, and then the other stuff going on here. So that's the way that things are running at the moment. Haven't got everything fixed, but at least it's coming along. And Adam, just before you go, one last question for you. If people want to know more about you and what you do, where do they go?
Head over to Adam Stokes on YouTube. Follow me on Adam_Stokesy on Twitter. Do everything crypto safely. If you're looking for a safe exchange or safe information or safe wallets, head over to the crypto land. That's www.thecrypto.land. Finally, check out my book, 28 Pro Trader Tips, The Art of Trading, on Amazon. Martin, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Adam. Really enjoyed it. And we must do it again sometime soon. So thanks very much, folks. I'm going to close the show now. Lots of comments in the chat, acknowledging them. Thanks for all the super chats and everything else. And I'll look forward to seeing you next week. This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, signing off. Cheerio.